The start of a new year is always such a great time to sit back, reflect, and think about our past sewing and what we want to achieve for the future. And in today's video, I'm going to sit down with you and talk about ways to help you plan your basically what you want to sew and achieve in 2021. And I'm going to sit down, grab your pen and paper because I'm doing mine in real time and ask you the questions so you can do your own planning and really achieve those sewing goals that you have for yourself ahead this year. Welcome back, my sewing friends. It is so lovely to see you in this new year of 2021, at least in the time of filming. This is the first video I have filmed in this new year, and I thought, what better way to do than sewing plans and goals and New Year's sewing resolutions. This video is sparked by a question that was posed to me and is really inspired by and dedicated to my students of Vintage Sewing School because we've talked a little bit about this in our community there, and I was blown away by the beautiful stories that my students have shared there about their sewing past and their sewing goals for the future, and it really inspired me to make this video and I guess really put on paper and look at my own personal sewing goals for this year. And let's do it though together in a way so we can do it together. So get your pencil, get your paper, because I have some questions for you to sit down and look so we can look at where you've been in the past year and look at how best to plan what you want to achieve this year. Because when you make plans, it's more likely going to happen, right? It's one thing to just say, I want to do this and this. It's another to sit down with some paper and actually plan out and make an action plan and have a vision for where you want to see yourself this time next year. I hope you've got your pen and paper, okay? So we have four main parts to this that I like to look at. So this is obviously, you could do this about any types of goals at all, but we're going to talk specifically about our sewing and our creative endeavors with sewing. And so I'm going to pose the questions that I ask myself, and I'm going to give you my answers on what my goals are, because this is part of me setting my vision for what I want to achieve this year, and so that you can follow along and do it too. So we have four main parts, looking back, now, the future, and our action plan. So let's start with looking back at the past year. So I want you to think back on this past year. Maybe you haven't been sewing for a full year, maybe only a few months, but look at your past sewing journey year and reflect on your journey. What was the journey like? What did you learn along the way? What did you make? What either skills that you've learned or even lessons that you've learned or projects that you've made that gave you the most sense of satisfaction and achievement? Write those down. What got in your way the most? What were roadblocks that you found, the hurdles that you had? Write those down. So let's really reflect, take a moment to reflect upon your past year's sewing journey. So this could be, for example, maybe you just started to learn sewing this year and picked it up. And I know in Vintage Sewing School, a lot of the members mentioned about, because they're starting as well, that they really sort of came into learning the skills of sewing, but really learnt to slow down and appreciate the process of sewing and not just the outcome, for example. Or some students mentioned things like certain projects that they thought were way too advanced for themselves, but they tried it anyway. And even though it's not perfect, they have such satisfaction knowing that they still went ahead with it and they learnt what they needed to do and they got there, and it's not perfect and that is okay, but they achieved that and they have the wonderful project that they had, anticipated so much in their mind. So what gave you the greatest sense of achievement and lessons learned through your sewing journey in this past year? It is a great time to reflect. And so what is mine? So for me, the past year has really been, for me, the year of no sewing. I know that sounds really weird. So my year was really about not sewing for myself, but it was my year of teaching sewing. So it has been just over 1 full year now of me launching Vintage Sewing School. And so with this it grew faster than I could ever imagine, and it gives me the most joy in teaching people how to sew themselves. And so I found myself being so busy building my school and working with my students there that I didn't have time for my own personal sewing anymore. And the sewing that I did were more lessons and all of this rather than garments I can wear in my wardrobe. I struggled with this at the beginning of the year a little bit, but then I just come to terms with it and realize that, you know what, I'm okay with this. This is okay, because I got more joy from seeing all of my students' skills grow and seeing what they create. That was my journey in 2020, is helping other people achieve their sewing goals and seeing them rather than me getting garments to wear myself. And that was okay. So it was really the year of no sewing and the sewing of teaching. But my biggest hurdle with that was time, because, with a new business venture and it growing so fast, is that it took up all my time. So I didn't have any time for personal sewing. And so that's what I really struggled with myself personally last year in 2020. Okay, so make sure you write all that down. Make a little, on your page, make a section and put looking back, the past, 2020. What was the last year like? Write those things down. Okay, so now let's look at where we are now. So obviously we've learnt those lessons that we have just looked back on, but what's happening right now in your sewing world that what you're struggling with, maybe what roadblocks you keep hitting, what are those things that you keep saying in your mind that keep happening? So maybe a skill you can't work out, maybe you just can never figure out zips, maybe it's the finishes that you're always unhappy with, maybe your sewing space is less than desirable and it's hindering your creative mind in what you can do. Maybe you just keep hitting roadblocks on fitting. You just can't get things to fit properly, and maybe that's where you're at. So look at where you are right now and those things that keep popping up. You know what they are because they're always in the back of your mind. You might not have ever said it out loud yet, but I'm sure you know what those things are for you right now. So my personal place where I am right now, a little mini update for those of you following along in everything here. So I should have mentioned that in the past, it was also my sewing space that hindered me in my creative endeavors as well. Whilst it doesn't look pretty now, and I guess this is where I'm coming to explain this, is it was not like I used to have a big studio and I had the entire space all to myself to work on all of my projects, and everything had its own place. I had a beautiful big cutting table. I had my sewing machines here, everything set up perfect, just the way I like it. Wonderful. And then I came up here, as you know, for a supposedly temporary space. And it really put me back into having to work in the space that you've got with a lower table cutting space. It's big, but it's not what I'm used to big, that's for sure. Limited. I only had my domestic sewing machines instead of my industrials. And so it was hard workflow for me to figure out, as well as the time. And so where I am right now is, little update for you all, is over Christmas I have actually relocated here. Well, it's still temporary, but I am here permanently now. I have packed up my place that was in Brisbane, and I am now up here in the tropics permanently. Well, this space here is still temporary permanent because we are looking for our dream home to actually move into. So fingers crossed that happens very soon, but I have then now relocated. So I have sewing space to deal with. Hence why this is a mess. This is the cleanest it's looked for days. I have things on the floor down here. I've tried to hide it, but obviously not so much. So I have my industrial sewing machines here, and I've had a bit of my things with me, some small boxes of fabric and some trims, but most of it has gone into storage. But so I have right now sewing space dilemmas in trying to organize everything into a nice space workflow so that I can work nicely. I have my industrial machines, some more fabric, more supplies, which is fantastic. And I'm so looking forward to using my industrial machines. Oh, did I mention that? So excited. And right now I am in my business looking at getting help and growing my business getting help so that I have more free time for more of my own creative endeavors, because I want to expand what I'm doing even more. So that does require me to get help and have more time for these creative projects in my life. So that's kind of the things that I'm working on right now, where I'm at right now. Now, did you write down where you are at right now? I hope so, because now we need to move on. Oh, did I mention I'm always still struggling to make time for sewing? Yeah, that's always there. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's move on to the future. So this is the really fun part, right? So when I talk about the future, I mean, think about your sewing journey. I want you to think about it as if it's 1 year from now. This time next year, December 31st, 2021, think about your sewing journey, your goals, your skills, your projects that you've made, and think about where you want to be, but think about it like it's already happened. So what is it you want to maybe make this year? Are there certain projects that you just always wanted to make? For instance, in Vintage Sewing School, some of the members there mentioned things like wanting to bring more historical garments into their everyday wardrobe. No matter what other people might think about it, stop being scared of bringing these really beautiful pieces into their wardrobe and creative expression in their dress. There are certain projects that you might have. Maybe it's skills that you want to work on, be it zips or master the art of fitting. And think about it in a way like, this time next year, I want to feel confident making garments and be able to make the fit adjustments required so that you can put it on and really feel proud and satisfied and stand tall in the garments that you're wearing, because you know that you're getting there. Not there, because I don't think there is any end ever to our sewing progress. So think about it in a way of that you're already there. What do you want to achieve this year? So as I said, the projects, the skills, maybe it's just making time for what you like, having time blocks, and you're at the end of the year and you magically have every Sunday is your sewing day, or you have finally created that perfect space that you want that allows you to be creative in your sewing. What is it that you really want to achieve? And think about the feeling that you want it to give you as well that comes with it. Really let yourself be inspired. So for me, I have already written these down. I want, besides having my dream home and dream sewing studio space all set up, of course, I have no control over that. So I'll keep putting that in my vision, but can't control that one. So I want to be able to, at the end of the year, I want to be able to look back and make a video about all of the projects, all of the makes that I have made for 2021. I want new pieces in my wardrobe that I can wear every day. I want this to happen. I want more pieces that I can wear. That's definitely it. So I want them to be a collection though as well. I'm always tired of just making one single items here that don't ever work as a full working wardrobe that actually cohesively go together. So that will mean using my collection planner. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want a cohesive collection of the garments that I'm making. I want them to be all cohesive. And so I also want to, through my projects that I'm making this year, I want to explore some new skills and add some new elements to my sewing. For example, I want to, with a certain, have a project that will make me work on insertion lace, or a project that will work on soutache or something like this. Very probably more decorative applications on top of sewing. So that is kind of what I want to work on. And I also want my projects to be based around working out my own sort of pattern system and using my projects to really hone in on creating my sort of bottling my processes for creating garments so that I can obviously help more people and my students in Vintage Sewing School and be able to create processes around the creative process and patterns and systems of doing things. So I want my projects to be able to help me do this as well. So did you write down your future visions? I hope so. Do write it down because it really does help. And I'll, write it down in the comments below, of course, as well, each of these categories. So we've looked at the future. And I mean, this is probably the one that you have like list, all these things. It could be specific things you want to make, the skills. Go to town. Just what is your vision? Keep it really like your vision, I think, focused is more beneficial than specific individual things, because that is where we come into next, and that is what I call your action plan. So having a vision and working through all of this is great, but it doesn't get you to the end result. What gets you there is by your action plan. And this is where I like to focus, and I think I found definitely in Vintage Sewing School, many of the members reflected this as well, that they found it more useful to focus on not the individual projects, but focus on, say, allowing and setting aside time each week, month, whatever it might be, for your sewing and to achieve your goals. So for example, rather than saying, I want to make one garment per month, or I want to make this top, this skirt, this dress, etc., because it's all about the process, right? We know this. Sewing is about that creative process. And so it's more about setting aside the time every week. Say every Sunday is sewing day, every Wednesday evening is sewing evening, and then work out, and just however long it takes you is however long it takes you to enjoy the process of your sewing endeavors, of this craft that we do. So I would encourage you to, when you're making this action plan, to think about more setting aside time, blocks of time, rather than specific projects in a timeline, because things always take longer than we thought. We know this already. So when you're making your action plan, think about, what do you need to do to get there? So do you need to learn new skills? Do you need to, think about all the steps, those visions that you had, work out all the steps, all the little things that you need to do to get there. And just at this point, list them all out, and then make the steps. And what do you need to commit to yourself to get there? So for example, mine, I need to dedicate time. I would like to think that I'm going to make a project a month, but some of these, some months for me, I will maybe do refashions and focus on refashions and do a lot of little ones, or mending or something like this. So it's not really one project a month. What I know I can commit to is time. I need to make the time for myself. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a look at my schedule, and I'm going to make at least 2 time slots for the week for personal sewing. And so it might be one evening, a weekend day, or 2 evenings, 3 evenings, something like this. I'll have to have a look at my schedule for this year and work out, but I'm going to block out time slots, and that is personal sewing time to do my projects, and that is it. And not let work or other things creep in. That is your set time. Think about it as if you've booked time away at a sewing class or something like this. This is what I tell my students too when they're working on Vintage Sewing School project, is think about it like you've had to leave the house to go to a class. That is how important your time allocation is. Only you can make it happen, so it is up to you to make it happen. So I am taking my own advice here, and I'm going to make some time slots for personal project sewing during the week. And it's going to be like Mondays, Sundays, whatever it is, an actual day of the week, not sort of pre-planned, but every day at the same time is much easier to make it happen. And the other thing I need to do for this is to plan ahead. So in order for me to make a cohesive collection of garments, they will need to be planned ahead. And I can pick up at any time when my time slot is there. It's already planned. I know what I'm going to make. I don't have to sit there and think, what will I make today? Because that hinders the progress. So I'm going to sit down and actually work more on my collection planner, my sewing journal this year. Collection planner is something I've did in Vintage Sewing School during the year. We did a little workshop on this, and it's just my process of how I go through and look at my wardrobe, what I already have, look at how I create mood boards to create cohesive collections, and then design each piece around this so that you get a better workshop. So members of Vintage Sewing School, you have this already. We might do another, maybe a workshop together in there. I don't know. But so I'm going to work down and really work on planning out my sewing endeavors ahead of time so that they fit into my time slots perfectly. So they're the two real action plan things that I think I need to do to achieve my vision, my goal of at the end of the year being able to have these projects that I'm wearing that also include new skills to learn and new to add to my craft is what I want. So that is my action plan. Now, does that give you a bit more of an idea of maybe how you should look at what you need to do for your action plan? Make it specific, write it down. So write down in the comments, write down your sewing journey of the past, write down where you are now, and write down your future and your action plan, and have a look at everybody else's down there in the comments, because I bet you'll be so inspired. There'll be so many great things down there as well for you to be inspired by and get ideas of how maybe things to work, and maybe action plans that you can implement yourself. You might not have thought that way before. So I really, really look forward to reading all the comments here, and make sure you give them a like that you do like. So good luck, my sewing friends. It is always so exciting to start a new year with new projects and new skills to look forward to, and what we all want to achieve and learn this year. It is my absolute pleasure to be with you on this sewing journey, and hopefully I will get to share some of my sewing projects and endeavors with you, of course, here as well. So good luck, my sewing friends. Can't wait to read your sewing goals this year because it is so inspiring. Okay. Happy sewing planning. Bye.